What is up, everybody? It is awesome to be back. We're doing another digital art market review show. We did it last week because Kevin and Derek could not be on the show. So we just said, let's just do this digital market review. We had Roger on the show and it was incredible. So we decided, let's just do it again. And a lot of it is that, I had the daily show before. Right now I drop it in the Proof Discord on Mondays and Wednesdays, but we do the daily show format here. So we're going to give that deck as well. But first, we needed someone on the show who can talk markets, who's in the media game, who's in the art game. And we got Bryan Brinkman on the show. Bryan, what is going on, man?
Hey, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. Like Mao and I were talking about who to have. And I said, let's bring in an artist who also has great perspective on the market. And you also just started a podcast, didn't you?
Yeah. Me and Adam Tastic started a show called Art First, where we just kind of bring on artists, talk about what they're working on, what their process is, and then we all just kind of share stuff we've collected. I'm a big fan of show and tell, and it's just a cool way for us to kind of share about kind of emerging artists.
For sure. When we were talking before, you said that you think the NFT market's one big game of show and tell. What do you mean by that?
Well, I just think there's this, some people call it flexing, but I think part of collecting is showing other people what you collect and telling people why you like it. And the things that we see do really well in the space are the things that people can talk a lot about, where they're like, oh, did you know the squiggle moves, do all this stuff. So it's, telling is just as important as showing.
For sure. Yeah, no, it's one of the interesting things. I still remember I tweeted once about how, projects just had too much supply, and all these economists started kind of dunking on me, saying NFT bros finally figuring out laws of supply and demand. And what I think they missed, though, in that comment is that it's actually not that simple in our space. You actually want to have a fair bit of supply, because that's when you get more telling and more showing and more people out there just like showing off your work. And that's actually really important. A lot of times bigger projects do better than one of ones, which is kind of a interesting thing. But anyways, yeah, on that point, let's get into let's start out here. Why don't we start here with the deck, kind of just going over the week in NFTs, give you a quick overview of what has happened, and then Bryan and I will talk about a lot of the cool topics and interesting things happening. Starting off just with a quick overview of volumes. Volumes really started to pump here, and it felt a little bit more meaningful than before. One thing you can see is this little orange here represents the CryptoPunks market. Had a lot of volume there, more than we have seen really at any point this year. So that was interesting, but then a whole lot more that was also happening. Buyer wallets. Now, one of the bear cases for this rally is that we're not getting a whole lot of new buyer wallets. That started to change a couple days ago. We kind of almost got to 10,000 unique buying wallets for the first time, really in 6 months or so. But then yesterday that kind of fell off, perhaps because gas was higher, perhaps just because markets fell back a little bit. This chart is absolutely crazy. ETH is up, and this is the price of my large cap PFP index. We're back to levels that we were before the elementals reveal. And the elementals reveal was when Uzuki basically went from 15 to 4, something like that. And so many other NFTs fell with it. And we are back above those levels in US dollar terms. So that is very cool to see. As far as what have been the projects that have had the biggest returns in the past week, it's kind of been across the board. I mean, from Cool Cats had a huge move, made some announcements. Doodles, a massive move. Crypto, it's World of Women, Punks. Bored Ape Yacht Club had a move. Pretty much everything was up. And this chart is even crazier. This looks at the mid cap PFP index, and that's just been completely on fire. Strength in Deadfellas, the Grapes, a lot of these game token type NFTs like the Grapes, Mochaverse really rallied. Cyber Brokers, On-Chain Monkey, very strong as this theme of things that are on-chain doing well, tended to perform really well. So just crazy strength across the board in some of the mid-cap NFT projects. And even art blocks started rallying every week until now. I've been saying PFPs are up and art blocks are kind of trending lower or flat. We actually had a big rally in the art blocks index. Now, one thing I have to caveat this with is that this is not because there's been tons of volume in the art blocks index or in different art blocks. It's because, 1, 2 Fidenza sales, 2 Ringer sales sends the floor price from 30 to 40 in the case of Ringers. And this is based on floor prices, but at least floor prices are going up. And we saw that in the art blocks recently. Let's talk about a few of the bigger sales. We had the Spiral Fidenza sell for 100 ETH. Now, interestingly, that's a massive sale no matter how you cut it. But the last 3 Spiral Fidenza sales before this were in the 200 to 400 ETH range. So a big price, but spirals have tended to trade at a premium. There were 2 Ringers that sold for 28.5 ETH each. We have this Pipe Chromie Squiggle, which was bought by GordonGoner. And I'm going to talk about GordonGoner more, but love to see him buying the art blocks and then an archetype there for 11 ETH. Now, Yeah. So let's talk about a bit more about the art world. One of the cooler things that happened this week was the Trichro-matic art blocks curated drop by Mount Vitruvius. He's been a very prolific artist and just always has very catchy, appealing art that he drops. And this one just was right place, right time, right design, and just very, very cool art. And we saw a sale at 7.7 ETH that William Mapam bought. We had a couple sales for 6 ETH. And this is just kind of where the sales were. You can see that, it minted around 0.85, kind of shot all the way up above 2, and has since kind of been trending in that 1.5 to 1.7 ETH range. So nice to see collectors getting a win because it's up about 2x from the mint price. Oh, whoops, I did that one twice. One thing I thought was interesting, though, is if you actually look, and I'd be curious, I'm going to ask Bryan about this later, but if you look at art blocks curated projects over the course of the year, a lot of them really just haven't made big moves, haven't really done much. And this, if you overall market cap, Trichro-matic right now is the 3rd highest of the whole year. I kind of put in red some of the ones that have gotten a bit more attention: Human Unreadable, Cargo, and The Harvest. But Trichro-matic is right up there with those 4, which really stand out as far as how they've done. One of one sales, interestingly, just not happening right now. So everything is popping off. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying. It's the group things, the stuff with a lot of holders have really gone higher, but one of one sales have been extremely slow. Very few one of one sales above 4 ETH over the course of the whole year, the course of the whole week, which is very, pretty uncommon. Biggest sales, this Botto project for 6.9 ETH, one of the bigger Botto project sales. Again, you throw a frog on any NFT and the community eats it up. So we had that 6.9, this Anoyima, I can't even pronounce it, 3.2 ETH. And this is Nude Art Girl, something like that. Nude Yoga Girl, my bad. Also has this pseudo identity, second identity. And that was for 3.2. This one by Ilan Derek had a sale, and a couple others, but really, really slow in the one of one space. Another project to talk about, Jake Fried's North Star with Transient Labs, sold out 100 pieces for 1 ETH. The buyer can pick which image they want on the cover. And over time, he's going to be adding more. And this is part of a Transient Lab contract called Doppelganger that they made with Patrick Amadon. So that is cool to see. Again, this was a 1 ETH mint price. And the sales have a few below there, but broadly speaking, have been in that 1 to 1.5 ETH range. The floor is above 1. So it's nice to see that as well. Also, this piece by Slime Sunday was an open edition. He did on Nifty Gateway, $120 per sale, and over 800 sold. So very strong. In the beginning, holders of his could get art at $40, but most of them were at 120. Right now, the floor is at 150. Cool stuff from Slime Sunday. Slime Sunday has been producing similar look and feel art every year or over the past 3 years. So this was the 3rd of them. So really kind of a tradition of this art that's being created. And then I also had to talk about the GordonGoner sales. Here is a cartoon that Mando put up, which was pretty cool. But Gordon, says, JFC Gordon, how many Grail NFTs are you buying? He said, yes. And that's one thing I've been noticing. Is there was this idea at the beginning, like what's Gordo going to buy next? He's going to buy 4, 5, 6. He's just bought a lot. And it feels like he has a bit of a dopamine addiction going on here, where he wants to keep buying more and more Grails. Some of the biggest sales he had, one, and of course the zombie CryptoPunk, which set this off, 600 ETH. The previous zombie punk was 400 or 420 ETH, so about 200 ETH higher than the previous zombie. Just a massive sale there. And I believe the biggest sale since September 1st. I believe the previous biggest sale had been a Mega Mutant. He bought this Doodle for 69 ETH before this sale. Before this, the biggest Doodle sale of the year was 50 ETH. So the biggest Doodle of the year by far goes to GordonGoner for the year. He bought a Fidenza for 79 ETH, a Meebit for 42. Also bought a Nizuki Spirit. I think that was 89. He really bought a whole lot of stuff. So very cool to see all of that happening. And yeah, it's just kind of just brought all this energy to the space that has been kind of weird. It's like, why is this one guy buying NFTs having such a big impact? Something, Bryan, definitely want to get your thoughts on as well. And then lastly, Magic Eden and Bored Ape Yacht Club announced about a week ago that they're going to be doing a partnership to enforce royalties. Something I definitely want to continue to discuss. As far as, we got some Brian Brinkman specific news I just wanted to throw in here. Gateway Miami, head of Art Basel, which is December 6th through 8th, announced the artists that they are going to be featuring. And Bryan was on that list, along with a lot of the other top artists out there, like ACK and Emi Kusano and many others. And then lastly, ETH pumping. And Brian Brinkman said, I'm embarrassed to admit, I still don't know what an ETF is. We can talk about that. But, whatever it is
a lot of people told me.
Yeah, well, you got all sorts of. I love the comments in that because every single person had kind of more a joke comment. But I was curious, like, is this I think as a lot of times the things that we know, we just kind of take for granted that so many people don't know, or I mean, that so many people do know, but a lot of people actually just don't know the language. So I thought it was good that you pointed that out. And then lastly, the other thing that happened this week was the Simpsons featured NFTs, and El Barbarojo, Benny said, "There's nothing like watching your heroes meet their heroes." Brian Brinkman meeting Matt Groening. This is from a year and a half ago, but people speculating that the reason Simpsons knew so much about NFTs is because Matt talked to you. Is that true? That's enough of my deck. Let's talk, Brian. Is that true or is that not true? What are your
yeah, I should
thoughts?
clarify.
Give us the truth.
Well, yeah, I got to meet Matt. That was like a childhood dream. Simpsons are like so important to not just myself, but the entire American culture. We did talk about NFTs for a little bit, but it wasn't like, I don't think he knew about NFTs before that. It was at an NFTLA gallery event that Julie Pacino was in. There was an awareness. So I don't think I've seeded that idea, but he was certainly thinking about NFTs and kicking the ideas around back then. So it's not shocking to see this, but you can also look at like Fox Animation. Probably around a year ago, they started investing in NFTs. They did the Crapopolis chicken drop, which is now airing on, it's kind of funny that like there's an actual show that airs next to The Simpsons that's like started via an NFT project and kind of culturally. So, I think there's a whole segment of Fox Animation that is looking at NFTs and trying to figure out how to integrate them into what they're doing. So I thought the episode, I went into it very worried that it would be like a little too harsh on NFTs. And while it certainly had some punches, it was more uplifting than I thought it would be. And so I walked away pretty happy with it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were surprised by how familiar they seem to be with just kind of like all these intricate details of NFTs, not just like Beeple, which kind of hit mainstream, but also, had a rainbow puke doodle in there. They had punks. They had references to so many different artists. But it sounds like from your experience, like they're kind of in the know and they're poking on Twitter.
Well, I mean, what was it, a year ago? They were doing NFT drops on the Vive app, or Vivi. I don't know how to pronounce it. But so, I mean, Simpsons has made NFTs. So they're, as much as they're lampooning it, they're also a part of it.
It was pretty funny. Like one of the things I tweeted is the show basically said that everything is entirely just driven by FOMO. It has no real value. It's overvalued. And at the end, Homer Simpson eats a chicken and everything goes to zero. And the entire timeline was like, we're back. NFTs are back. And it is, it is kind of, it does kind of bring up that is all press good press. And part of the idea of NFTs is that they are ridiculous. I think, something that all the way back to John and Matt from Larva Lab said was the whole point of CryptoPunks partially was that it was like this digital collectible that didn't make sense to people, and that was kind of what made it fun. So certainly it almost feels so long ago now that the Simpsons episode was happening because of everything that's happened with Gordon this week. But yeah, that really kind of was what kicked off this insane rally we've had.
Yeah, it's interesting just to kind of it's kind of a bottle of what culture feels about NFTs. So it's cool to see like that art NFTs were represented at all in the episode was kind of exciting for me because they could have just went straight at PFPs only. So the fact that it was aware to that degree, it's cool.
For sure. You've been in this space for many years, right? And you've seen bull markets and bear markets. Does this feel like the beginning of a bull market? Do you think we got a head fake going on? What's your general take on where we stand?
I can't fully tell. It does remind me a bit because I joined January 2020, and then it was kind of like 9 months later. Then things started to simmer. Seeing stuff in pop culture. I mean, back then it was like every news article, everyone lost their mind. There's CNN's talking about NFTs. We take it for granted now, but like nobody talked about them back then. And so starting to see these like moments of like that Roblox president talking about NFTs or the Simpsons, like having these kind of pop culture awareness things happening does feel like there might be this like the negativity might have faded a little bit. Maybe people are distracted looking at AI or something, but I feel like the fact that the markets have held as, even though everything's down bad, a lot of things are still doing great. I mean, CryptoPunks, even at its lowest, was still like over 50 grand or something. So there was a resilience in the market. And I think now we're starting to see everyone go, okay, we're back from the holidays. It's getting cold out. start looking at trading around. And I think there is a momentum happening. And I think it also times out with the meme airdrop that happened last week, and a lot of degens getting liquidity and going, oh, how can I put this into some projects and make more money off that airdrop?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there was that. It's kind of wild that you had an airdrop that just suddenly out of nowhere, $1 billion market cap token comes to, or valuation token comes into the market. Obviously, that's not how much liquidity there is, but it was still 9 figures of liquidity that degens got, and it's kind of money from the DeFi community, from the trading community that comes into the NFT community. And I think, I agree. I feel like that had a pretty big impact. I'd say there are 3 data, like, I think we're having a real rally here, and the CryptoPunks action is interesting. I tweeted this morning a chart that looks at the volume of punks on Blur relative to on Larva Labs. And in the past, we had a lot of volume, but it was always just people dumping NFTs on each other. And I think that ends up almost always being terrible for prices. What's happened here is this rally's all, if you look at the number of punks being traded, it's almost all on Larva Labs, people picking out which one they want and buying that one, which is just kind of a strategy for someone who's going to hold for a longer time. And this rally has been violent. I mean, it's been crazy how fast, especially in US dollar terms. And I think we've also really kind of, there's this myth in NFTs that higher ETH is bad for NFT prices. And there have been periods where that's been true, but the biggest bull markets we've had have kind of been, ETH rallying and NFTs rallying together. So it feels a little bit like that mechanism is happening here, where attention's coming to crypto, and then people are like, well, crypto's fun, but maybe it'd be fun to own a punk too. And it kind of starts filtering into more assets. So that is very, very cool to see.
I think even since 2020, there's always been this desire to trade up to a punk. And so I think what we're seeing is those captains holders and these, whoever's selling to Gordon or whoever, they're going to say, oh, I can go get a punk now. Because that's, Bored Apes is up there as well. But I think right now, punks is the top of the market. And so that's the desirable thing that everyone's going to kind of trade up towards. And so we're just seeing a lot of it. I know people that sold their meme airdrop to buy a punk. So we're just kind of seeing that effect happening in real time.
That's awesome. I threw this comment here. Also, Blur season 2 ending soon, and that's one of the reasons and I think that I think that farming is back in a serious way. I mean, the Blur token has gone from 0.15 to 0.38. A lot of times the farming impact is hard to really notice until suddenly someone dumps 50, and then you're like, oh shit, maybe all that volume that we were celebrating was Hanwei.eth or Machi Brother accumulating and we didn't know it. But that's one of the reasons I like looking at punks, is because we know that, I do think it's possible that like Flooring Labs is doing some of the buying here. One wallet mysteriously bought 10 yesterday for over $1 million. Like, I think that's possible, but it certainly, like you said, I think that there is a bit more genuine stuff that is going on.
There's a lot of people were holding ETH on the sideline waiting for it to kind of get to these levels. And now I think they're feeling more confident in buying NFTs. I think there's a general sense that the bottom is in. And so now is the time that you have to secure your grails while you can.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. What's your, one thing I'm kind of curious about, I think this week it's been crazy, the impact that GordonGoner has had. And I've met Gordon before. I just think he's like such a nice guy, but he's also so much of the spirit of what created the bull market. Like, fuck it, Mutant Saturday. He was saying, I remember on one of the interviews he did, he said, if you're worried about your floor price, you should go do mushrooms in the forest, come up with a cool idea and work on that. Like, he just kind of had this out there thing where he said what he was thinking, and it really resonated with holders at the time. But apes have been kind of, I don't think the art community has always loved the Bored Ape ecosystem, has always felt that much connection there. What do you think, what's your general perception of GordonGoner buying? And what do you think the art community has this been a non-story for the world that's a bit more on the art side? What do you think?
If I had to speculate on the general reasons, I think you mentioned one, which is Magic Eden coming out with the marketplace with Yuga. All of these things are going to be high volume things on that marketplace. The other aspect would be other side. Again, Gordon and Yuga have, as much as they cherish punks and Bored Apes, they've been about building out this general community that live within their ecosystem. And so I think those two things kind of tie into why he's kind of supporting all of these kind of bigger PFPs that have large active communities still, and saying, hey, I like you guys. we're all part of this together.
For sure. Yeah, no, it's and it was awesome to see him get into like chromie squiggles and Fidenzas yesterday. Before then it had been purely PFPs, and then he bought like a pipe squiggle. He bought
Yeah.
a yellow background Fidenza. And it
He
like,
was
yeah,
definitely, yeah. He was finding unique ones. And then I really appreciated that he rolled out the buys and gave each community their moment in the sun for like an hour or two before he did the next one. And he kind of made it this event. I think, I hope more funds and big whales start to kind of take this approach versus just like sweeping up 50 Bored Apes or something. Really kind of do this drip thing and let people enjoy the moments.
it really kind of ties back to the theme of the show and tell.
Yeah.
It's like, it's almost like when you really make these things financial assets and just sweep 10, and you're kind of missing a lot of the benefits and a lot of like, at some level, what creates value, which is people being proud of what they're part of and wanting to be with people who they respect. Let's move on quickly though, because it's exciting to have an Art Blocks artist here. What was your take on the, I mentioned, this curated drop that just, it was the fourth one to do well this year, but along with Human Unreadable in the curated space, along with Human Unreadable, the Harvest, and then Cargo has really popped off with Flamingo Dell buying and stuff. But what do you think about this art and about this drop in itself made it tick?
I thought it was a cool project. I love the artist. I mean, I think he's always been really good at kind of building these cohesive, nice looking, familiar looking projects like Mind the Gap. Immediately you go, oh, this has that kind of Fidenza kind of flow feel to it. And it's just very pleasing. And I think what I like about this project a lot is that the floor rarity stuff often, in my opinion, looks more appealing than the rare stuff. And so when you go and look at the project on OpenSea, the first 5 things you see on the floor all look amazing. Which is not easy to do. You really have to think about, what you make rare and what you don't. And so I think the project's super successful in that sense. But I do think it ties into an interesting theme across those examples, which is each of those projects play off familiarity, and kind of whales and collectors in this space tend to feel more comfortable, aping into something that they feel is more familiar. With Harvest, I felt like that had kind of a Meridian feel to it. And that's I felt Cargo had kind of an Xcopy glitch feel to it. The odd one out is Operator. I think that one's pretty unique, but they have such a pedigree to themselves that kind of lives on its own, kind of similar to like a Jen Stark Vortex. So yeah, I thought this project, when they started showing the outputs, it was very clear that it was going to do well because it reminded me of Unigrids. It reminded me of MP Cause's Metropolis drop. And I think immediately you're just like, oh, this is art. This is pleasing. And I think you could also see it kind of simmering in the alpha groups and stuff, because they were like, this one's gonna hit. And I think that's that whirlwind of the market kind of coming back, all these degens having this money to spend, was a nice, like, I don't know, it was like a perfect storm for this one to do really well. And I think if you look at like the holders, there's a lot of people that bought like 5+ of these in their collection. So there's a lot of people that are making big bets on it.
Yeah. I mean, and I think just at a very simple level, a lot of people, like, there are certain projects that people like for their technicality. They're certain because they bring something novel to Art Blocks. But I think, Tyler Warner's in the comments here. One thing he always comes back to is the wall test, which is, do I want to put this on my wall?
Yeah.
And I think this one just does that in spades. It not only has some technical excellence, but it's the type of thing that you want to put that on your wall. And that just ends up being the type of art that I think people hold longer over time. They find one that they really love. And I notice this with, like, when I'm talking about NFTs with people, first, you try to explain CryptoPunks and you can kind of get there, but it's difficult. But you show them a Fidenza and people are like, ooh, I love that, and I think that this kind of has a similar appeal. It has some technical intrigue, but also it's just stuff that really looks good. And I think it's kind of something that's made it exciting for a long time.
I think that subtle paint texture to it really adds to it as well, for like bringing in people that immediately at first glance will say, oh, this is more traditional than digital.
For sure, for sure. One thing, the last topic I wanted to talk on before, maybe we answer a couple of questions that are in the comments, but is this Magic Eden announcement that Magic Eden and Yuga are going to be having kind of a royalty enforced marketplace together? I think there's so many things that we don't know right now. The hardest thing about enforcing royalties is that if the other exchanges aren't enforcing royalties, is that at the end of the day, people tend to go to those other exchanges, to buy the NFTs. And we've seen that so many times over. So then there's the question of, do you need to upgrade a contract? So you're going to block other exchanges, and then everyone gets, not everyone, but a whole chorus of people start to get upset because it's not decentralized and they want their NFTs to be decentralized. And it's kind of one of those situations where you can't really have both at the same time. So I'm curious how they're going to approach that. Certainly Yuga and Magic Eden are both very familiar with these issues, but what was your read when you saw that announcement? What do you think's happening here?
Well, I mean, I think you mentioned it to me before the show. My initial read was, oh, it's interesting to see people kind of flip flopping. I think we've seen every platform kind of flip flop to a degree on how they're going to approach this. My initial read was, I'm excited to see what the idea is, because in terms of fixing royalties, everyone kind of laments, but the only way that I see a solution happening is if it happens on a marketplace that has the power to change it. OpenSea had that power, Blur had that power. The other ones were always a small fraction and never really had the power. But if Yuga can get everyone to start using Magic Eden, that becomes a third of the market, then maybe they have the power. And so I'm curious to see how, I assume they're going to leverage the ape token in some way. I'm curious if it only works for Yugas or if it works for everything. I'm curious if it will include art, because like most of my stuff isn't traded on Blur. So Blur doesn't really affect most artists. But OpenSea does. And so will this be the new OpenSea that we go to every day to look at our collection and do shopping for that stuff? So yeah, there's a lot of unknowns, but I'm hopeful, and I imagine if some of these ideas are strong, they'll be iterated on and people will find new solutions.
Yeah. I mean, I remember quite well when I think there's an exchange called YAW, YAWWW, that was competing in Solana in the Solana ecosystem and basically took royalties to zero. And Magic Eden had a true monopoly that went to about 50% market share. And their first approach was to try to find ways to protect creators. And one of the things they created was something where if your NFT was not traded you did not pay royalties, they created a tool where artists could brick them. They could basically turn them into like very blurry NFTs where this tech would like see that happened, and the community went crazy and called Magic Eden evil, right? Because they're like, you can't brick our NFTs, and then a couple weeks later, they're like, we built tools, we tried, our market share went from 95 to 50%. Like, we just can't require enforced royalties anymore, or we're going to go to zero. And the stuff that we did to protect creators, like, people destroyed us for. So they went to, and then they got destroyed for removing royalties. And I think it's been a very difficult environment for exchanges. But I do remember, because actually the founders of Magic Eden worked at Uber, where I worked before kind of joining this world. And I think that they do. I mean, they're technologically pretty savvy. I think they do. I think they think and they get that this whole ecosystem kind of, royalties did help it work better for everybody. It aligned interests across the board. And I'm curious what they do. I hope they don't force kind of a migration of Bored Ape Yacht Club tokens. I hope they don't do anything that's all that drastic, because I don't think that would work very well right now. But it'll certainly be interesting. One other question I have for you is, how has, like, what's the experience like being an artist when you think about your business, when you think about what you're dropping? Like, we've been in a year now of optional royalty environment. I can see why artists got so upset with OpenSea, because as you were saying, you weren't affected by Blur, you were fine. And then OpenSea, because they were affected by Blur, even though artists weren't, went to optional royalties and now have done that for everything. So I kind of get why artists were so frustrated. But how has that experience as an artist changed in kind of your business model?
Yeah, well, part of the frustration with OpenSea was they were like, oh yeah, go make this weird manifold contract right before this date and do A, B, C so that you can be prepared and all this stuff. And then they just threw it all out the window a couple months later. So that was when I think artists really kind of gave up. I think, royalties have never been sustainable for artists. You could argue maybe people that made 1 million open editions made a decent amount, but it's always been about primary. but I think what losing royalties did was it killed this idea of us giving out, rewards or airdrops or stuff like that, because I would be much more inclined to give away 100 free editions to collectors, knowing that I would make $5-10 on each additional flip or something like that, and you can kind of have fun with it. Now you're in a position where, like, if you do that, you're just essentially losing your scarcity and not gaining any sort of liquidity from it, and so it's a little more dangerous. So I lament that we lost a lot of the fun aspects of the space when we lost royalties, and it's always been this tricky situation where it's like, when people were fighting for royalties, it was because stuff on Super Rare sold maybe 1 to 2 times a year max. People weren't doing huge additions back in 2020, when like all these like 10% things were set. And then I think all the kind of PFPs milked that 10% to the point that disillusioned a lot of collectors. They saw it as a tax. And then, artists were kind of in the crossfire of these people that were exploiting the mechanic. And so, I totally sympathize with someone that doesn't want to pay a fee on something they lost money on. And I totally get a lot of those aspects, but I've always seen them as very two separate worlds. And as much as I'm rooting for Magic Eden, the chance of survival is more probably a marketplace that's art only doing royalties, versus kind of mixing all of them together.
Yeah, one of the things I think is too bad is I think now we're seeing a lot of artist drops. The price goes down very quickly. And I think there's kind of this environment where artists need to get as much from those primary sales because they're not going to be getting the royalties anymore. And we're just seeing it across so many drops where, they're priced to perfection. And then the secondary, so collectors end up losing money. And I think there used to be an environment where you could kind of be a bit more aligned and grow together. So that is something I find a little too bad. But we are out of time. I do want to answer a couple of questions out there. Most importantly, where can people find you? We have Ellie.jpg here saying, where can we watch the new show? I watched the first episode. It was great.
Thank you. The next one will be on Friday next week. It'll be on Twitter and YouTube. If you follow me and Adam or Art First on Twitter, we'll have Seneca on. I'm excited to chat with her about her new Transient Labs project. I'm on Twitter. My Discord is open if anybody wants to hang out in there, but I'm always around. Shoot me a DM if you want to chat.
Cool. Well, there are some other interesting questions out here, but we do like to keep this to about 30 minutes and we are there. So we'll stop it there, but thank you so much. It was a very kind of crazy week, and it's awesome to have a mind like yours.
It's a happy week.
It was a happy week. I mean, it's very rare that I'm out there tweeting, this one up, this sold for 80 ETH. I haven't done that for like 6 months. So it's been a pretty fun time. Vibes
are up. Got to enjoy it while we have it.
Hopefully that starts coming to the one-of-one art space as well. And, I feel like we're ready for something to follow, but cool. Thanks so much, Bryan, for coming on the show. Thanks to everybody in the comments and who joined us. We appreciate you. And come tonight, we got the 100 proof with Kevin. I think Justin's going to be on it. And Derek, it's going to be live in LA, and that's going to be awesome. So check that out as well. And we will talk to you soon.